So I'm going to turn to Charlotte Latin School in North Carolina, obviously in Charlotte. They apparently expelled two middle schoolers going back to 2021 because the parents started asking questions. What kind of questions? Well, like many private schools and certainly public schools in America, apparently this Charlotte Latin School made a sudden push left that shocks parents. We see this in so many schools. There was a culture shift inside the schools. These parents started to speak up. They didn't like diversity, equity, and inclusion being pushed. They didn't like BLM being mentioned in every email that went out to parents. They didn't like LGBT mania and these porn books that were being pushed on their kids in the school library. So what happened? Well, I can tell you, sounds to me like the administration turned on the parents. They sent a letter this is from the newly promoted assistant head of school for K through 12. Now, this is right before they got kicked out. And they wrote, and I quote, Latin's employment was positively affected by white females who felt strongly that they did not want to have their students in school with African American people, commonly referred to as white flight. This is saying how Latin was started. It seems to me to be all a lie. Well, Doug Turpin, his two kids were kicked out, complained about all of this. And they sent a letter back to him. And this is where the head of the school, lashed out at parents. Cut 12.
Let me just make some things very clear from the beginning. If you have seen the PowerPoint presentation done by a parent group calling itself Refocus Latin, there's no other way to describe it than just awful. The executive committee and myself met in good faith with this group, and the group met us with bad faith.
They were concerned about all these things. That's not bad faith. Over and over again, the school talks about honor and having the parents as an integral part of the school community. They kicked the kids out, I believe, to silence all parents, and they use these kids as an example. I want to bring in now the founders of Coalition for Liberty, Doug and Nicole Turpin, whose two children were kicked out of school. Doug and Nicole, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Doug, let me start with you. What do you want to happen after this lawsuit? The Supreme Court in North Carolina sided with you. It can go forward. What is the goal of this lawsuit against the school?
The number one goal, the reason we filed a lawsuit, because we tried to engage them in dialogue, and that's all Refocus Latin ever asked for. We asked them to be honest and transparent the way they promised they would, and simply tell us, what are you planning on teaching our children? We see that you put a picture of Jesus with his throat cut, black blood pooling down his shirt with the words, God is dead on his forehead. You put a picture in the school of a policeman dressed as a pig with all cops are bastards on it. You put a gay sex manual in the young children's section of the library. And we had questions, and they invited us to come and have dialogue with the board. And they promised us there'd be no retaliation allowed. So we engaged in a presentation at their request, and we told them about all these things. We asked them, please just tell us what you plan on doing with the school. But they didn't want to have dialogue, or at least Chuck Baldecki didn't. So they started harassing my son and telling him he couldn't use the bathroom. He couldn't drink water. And all Republicans are white supremacists. And so we, of course, when you hear this, it's story time with your young son, you're going to reach out. And, you know, he told me he was made to feel bad as if there was something wrong with him for being white. So I just wanted to have a conversation with him. They invited me into a meeting with the headmaster, and that headmaster that you saw, they promised us no retaliation for coming in. It was supposed to be a meeting about my son and his concerns, but he pulled out the enrollment agreements, waved it in my face, did everything he could to goad me into losing my cool. And I kept trying to have a respectful dialogue, and he wasn't working for him to goad me. So he just stood up and said, I'm expelling your kids from this school. As you said, we believe that that was an obvious attempt to try to silence all of the parents through a culture of fear. So we filed this lawsuit, and answer your question, to protect not just our family and our reputation, but to deter other schools from doing this. They sent out an email a couple days later that essentially implied everybody that was involved in our group, which were dozens of families, that implied we were all racist. You know, that's the story. If you're trying to engage in dialogue, you're racist, you're bigots, you're white supremacists. And
Well,
so we did this to deter, and we're the first to succeed.
all right, so you've got 12 lawmakers in North Carolina that are on your side. The Supreme Court just sided with you that the lawsuit can go forward. Nicole, I'll ask you. So your husband was talking about your son. Well, your daughter got kicked out too. Were there any behavior problems with these kids? And they got kicked out with hours of notice, right? This was not like, hey, go find your kid a new school. We want to go a different direction. Hours notice, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, my husband called me that morning and he said, you need to come to the school now. Our children have been expelled and they need to leave immediately. So, of course, I was completely shocked. And I found out while this was going on, our children were being asked to empty their lockers without any explanation and were led out by security guards or by a security guard to wait for us to pick them up. We picked them up and they were just asking us, what have we done wrong? What have we done wrong? And we had to tell them when we got home, you cannot go back to that school anymore. The only school they'd ever known. And to watch them sobbing was just heartbreaking. And then a couple of days after that, I was called and asked to pick up the rest of the children's stuff. I had to go to a teacher's house, meet her in the cul-de-sac in the night, in the late evening, where she brought out a black trash bag out of her trunk with the rest of our children's stuff in, culminating over a period of almost 10 years. So, Latin always says how special every child is, but our children were thrown out like trash, literally in a trash bag, their things. And when they'd done absolutely nothing wrong, it was absolutely heartbreaking. And it's something really hard to recover from.
And we had done nothing
Well,
wrong either. We
Yeah.
followed every procedure at the school. We were civil, respectful, and we only asked for dialogue and asked them to tell us what they intended to do.
Look, there is nothing wrong with parents wanting to know what's going on in the school. And this idea that this sudden change happened is happening in so many schools across the country, which is why it's important we tell this story. I'm grateful for your, I guess, bravery, boldness to take this all the way to the North Carolina Supreme Court as this moves forward. Please keep us posted on the case because I do think this story has national implications. Doug and Nicole Turpin, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Look, if they were successful at silencing them, then no other parent would have any repercussions to go after these schools except in a court of law. They can't be victorious here. We'll see how the case plays out.